Professor George Gantzias is pleased to have the opportunity to share a few remarks about info communication regulations, digital transactions and smart payment systems in Hellenic Open Business Administration, International Conference 2015, organized by Hellenic Open University. The title chosen for his presentation is Info Communication Regulations and Digital Transactions Culture. The Global Smart Currency Global InfoCash as a practical solution to humanitarian crisis. He is afraid he had to fit rather a lot into his presentation, and so some of the arguments are a bit compressed. He has dealt with the development of info communication technology and regulations, and how info communication transactions landscape affects both smart transactions and payment systems in cultural and economic crisis. He has also dealt with the role of info communication globalization, the internet, social media and the definition of regulations. So he would like to spend a bit more time to explain about the info communication transactions landscape, ICTL, the info communication globalization, definition of regulations, smart currencies and info communication markets. With this context, he would like to examine info communication industrial platforms for creating and regulating global smart payment systems and digital currencies. In addition, he analyzes digital payment systems together with role of self-regulation in info communication card processing ecosystem. Finally, he would like to recommend strongly the Smart 3 Action Program in order to introduce the Code of Digital Transactions Go.D.TRA and the Global Smart Currency Global InfoCash, GIC, together with the regulation of smart transactions, RST, and info communication regulation culture, ICRC, as practical way for Greece to emerge from humanitarian crisis. Professor Gantzias pointed out that information and communication technology is preservative in the following: info communication production sector, digitization of production process of turning raw material into a product for retail. Info communication trade sector, digitization of local and global markets, that is the digitized transaction and payment systems in info communication markets. Info communication of cultural, media and education sectors, digitization of information, education and entertainment, that is within info communication industrial platforms, social media, info communication regulations, etc. Info communication of economic activities, that is banking cloud services, digital payments, credit card payments by using smart mobile phones tools and applications, that is the global smart currency, GIC. Info communication regulations on bureaucratic systems, that is electronic tax systems, electronic banking and monetary systems, regulations of smart transactions in info communications markets. It is in this way that information and communication technology shapes the info communication transactions landscape, ICTL, in cultural and economic crisis. Moreover, if we look at smart payment systems as a process that defines and nurtures the way people make payments, then smartphones not only changes traditional payment systems but they change them in a very particular direction, by making payments via smartphones at any time, anywhere, by everybody. It is naive to think otherwise. He also pointed out that info communications technologies have changed how regulations operate on the info communication transactions landscape, ICTL. For example, the digitization of services has meant that nation-states, that is Greece and other European countries, have become more socially plural and multicultural. Moreover, digitalized content and services of digital economy have provoked counter-pressures for regulation and re-regulation to maintain or restore national social order in a free market economy. Therefore, info communication technologies and regulations are important ingredients in order to set up regulation mechanisms on info communication transactions landscape, ICTL, that is the regulation of smart transactions, RST. With this context, the info communication transactions landscape, ITCL, is a type of digital transactions space which consists of smart payment systems, that is peer-to-peer, and smart transaction systems, social media, cloud computing services, multifunctional info communication devices, all type of smart mobile phones, computers, tablets, PCs, etc., and broadband networks in which all national economic, cultural and political systems together with traditional banking and monetary systems become open, transparent and accountable to global and local regulation mechanisms in info communication globalization. In addition, all national states systems together with traditional banking and monetary systems need to behave according to the logic of multicultural public interest principles both globally and locally. According to Professor Gantzias, info communication globalization is a type of globalization which is defined by the Internet, social media, digital transactions, the net generation, multifunctional info communication devices, all type of smart mobile phones, computers, tablets, PCs, etc., and broadband networks, the info communication transactions landscape, global and local regulative mechanisms and multicultural public interest principles in which all economic, cultural and political systems together with traditional banking and monetary systems become open, transparent and accountable both locally and globally. Professor Gantzias uses the dictionary definition of regulation together with John Francis's definition of regulation in order to gain a better understanding the regulation of smart transactions, RST, and the info communication regulation culture, ICRC, in recent cultural and economic crisis. First, according to the dictionary definition of regulation, regulation is to control by a rule, to set up a framework of rules governing an area of activity. There is no absolute agreement as to what is meant by the term regulation in the context of public policy, in a free market economy and in the digital transaction culture, DTC. It is used in many different ways. Perhaps the most common usage is state intervention in the running of private business or in the growth of a free market economy or in managing humanitarian crisis. Second, John Francis's exclusive definition of regulation is the intervention by the state in private activity in order to realize public purposes. With this context, the majority of state regulation, statutory regulation, is nevertheless aimed at controlling the commercial activities of private enterprises for a wide variety of social and cultural reasons. However, these reasons for regulation may or may not be justifiable, but at least the state in a democracy, that is the Greek government due to humanitarian crisis, should come up with some fairly good justifications for interfering in banking and monetary systems, or regulation will just be evaded or ignored. Professor Gantzias points out that in the case of global humanitarian crisis info communication regulations may be justifiable in order to avoid anarchy in free market economies, that is Greece, Spain, Italy, Cyprus, etc. In the case of peer-to-peer currency that is Bitcoin info communication regulations may be justifiable in order to avoid chaos in banking and monetary systems both globally and locally. For example, Bitcoin is an experiment digital currency created, managed and transferred, spent, via peer-to-peer info communication networks, over the info communication transactions landscape, ICTL, via Internet users running a specialized computer program. A Bitcoin is a string of numbers generated by a powerful computer network system and is normally stored in computers without any transparent, reliable or accountable global regulatory official mechanism. The Bitcoin can be used as a payment system by any retailer who accepts Bitcoins as a reliable payment system, or transferred to any individual running a Bitcoin computer program. As a payment system, the Bitcoin is not regulated by any government or commercial organization, and, as such, there is no local or global official regulative mechanism to support each Bitcoin. According to Professor Gantzias, the Bitcoin will encourage the money laundering process and make it easier for launderers to turn legally obtained money into clean, untraceable funds. Within this context, a global regulation mechanism for peer-to-peer digital currency does not exist at the moment. With this context of smart payment systems, there are 5 types in payments work together. Regulation of smart transactions may be justifiable to all types of payments on info-communication transactions landscape, ICTL. First type of payments, info-communication acquirers, processors. Acquiring banks, such as Alpha Bank, are members of card networks like MasterCard and Visa, and are responsible for providing merchants with most of the systems they need for accepting card payments. The info-communication processors are responsible primarily for data transmission and data security, that is, security transfer managers. Second type of payments, independent sales organizations, ISO, and merchant service providers, MSP. ISOs and MSPs are entities that sell payment processing info-communication services to merchants on behalf of acquirers, processors, but are not banks. There is no significant difference between an ISO and an MSP. MSPs are registered with MasterCard while ISOs are registered with Visa. Third type payments, info-communication issuers, issuing banks, or issuers, provide consumers and businesses with debit and credit cards connected to checking or credit accounts. Fourth type payments, info-communication card networks. Card networks like Visa or Discover act by using info-communication industrial platforms as a kind of hub within the card processing ecosystem and serve 2 main functions: routing transactions between issuers and acquirers, and setting the rules by which the info-communication network of merchants, acquirers, processors, and issuers operates. With this context, self-regulatory global mechanisms may be justifiable in info-communication card processing ecosystem. According to Professor Gantzias, what we experience in self-regulations organizations is that self-regulating card processing ecosystem can bring great technical expertise to bear on certain regulatory issues, but they can also be like foxes guarding chicken coops. Professor Gantzias has long been skeptical of self-regulation process due to obvious conflict of interests, and that skepticism has been deepened by how banking and monetary regulators perform in the run-up to the humanitarian crisis. Therefore, to develop a global regulation mechanism for smart payment systems, regulators must regulate, not delegate, both locally and globally. Last type of payment, info-communication gateway providers. E-commerce companies have certain special requirements for running payment card transactions. Info-communication gateways like Stripe act as the portal through which e-commerce merchants connect to acquirers. With this context, the info-communication computing platform, ICCP, have placing e-commerce companies on the info-communication transactions landscape, ICTL. Payments via smartphone are a reality in our everyday life. Smartphones enable users to have access to digitalized payment systems at any time and anywhere. This picture outlines that mobile phones is the future in ICTL. According to Ericsson report, total mobile subscriptions were around 6.8 billion in Q2 2014. Of these, 80 million new subscriptions were added during Q2 2014. However, the actual number of subscribers is around 4.6 billion, since may have several subscriptions. Moreover, according to different Ericsson reports, the future is mobile payment systems. With this context, the smart payment systems are likely to dominate the free market economy by 2020. This picture outlines the digitalized transformation of cultural and creative industries to info-communication industrial platforms. With this context, digital consumptions and smart payment systems, really appearing in our everyday life. Digitalized transactions and payment via smartphones increasingly circulate across national borders. In 1998, Professor Gantzias pointed out in his book The Info-Communication Industry, Digital Services, Global Markets, that the info-communication industry and digital transactions are likely to be a reality in 21st century. Moreover, he pointed out that the info-communication industrial platforms are likely to create smart payment systems and Infocom PC by the second decade of 21st century. However, the digital platforms of the info-communications industry are The info communication devices, digital access systems, that is smartphones. The info communication networks, digital distributed systems, cloud computing and info communications gateways like Stripe. The info communication contents, digital content systems, digital voice, video, text and pictures. The info communication services, digital services systems, that is payment via smartphones. The info communication security, digital security system. The above info communication industrial platforms are a reality now. Moreover, the info communication transactions landscape, ICTL, which is likely to create the code of digital transactions, code.d.tra, and establish the global smart currency global info cash, CIC, is a reality in cultural and economic crisis. According to the Info Communication Globalization, Participatory Freedom and the Global Info Cash, CIC, the difference between the physical form of money and the digital form of money in economic crisis is enormous, because a hand-to-hand payment ecosystem could be opaque, and thus deprive the state of valuable resources for payment of salaries and pensions, spending on health and education, and investments in development projects. Conversely, smart currency's digital ecosystem is unavoidably recorded and thus taxed. With this context, digital currencies together with the smart payment systems bring opportunities to develop more sophisticated transaction systems in humanitarian crisis. According to Buy Intelligence report, the credit card industry processes a massive volume of transactions, that is $2.7 trillion in 2015 in the US. Professor Gantzias pointed out that both mobile phones, as digital wallets, that is Apple's Pay, allows iPhone users to tap pay at the tap of a button, and info communication regulations have changed how businesses operate, banking systems function and people live. For example, Apple Pay allows iPhone users to store their credit card details on their phones, and then pay at the tap of a button. In its first 3 months, more than $2 out of every $3 which U.S. consumers spent using speedy new contactless systems at the 3 major credit card networks was done via Apple Pay. With this context, digital transactions culture, DTC, have reshaped how humanity communicates and how people understand the role of digital payment systems on the info communication transactions landscape. Professor Gantzias pointed out that the role of smart payment systems is how to build, maintain and modify traditional payment models, which are very important tools for introducing smart currencies, that is global info cash, CIC, and payment via smartphones. For example, Visa Europe has announced a new, more secure way for consumers to pay retailers via smartphones, a move that could set the stage for Apple's Apple Pay and rival mobile payment services to be introduced into Europe in the coming months. In the case of smart payment systems, that is the global info cash, CIC, Apple Pay, etc., info communication regulations should be justifiable, because statutory regulation and self-regulation are the main factors to set up a reliable and transparent info communication transactions landscape, ICTL, for multicultural payment systems to operate both locally and globally. For example, European leaders should be able to understand the important role of ICTL at a European level in order to develop smart regulations, that is regulation of smart transactions, RST, for digital payment systems via smartphones, or to introduce smart multicultural payment models, that is the code of digital transactions, code.d.tra, in order to create European local smart currencies with global range, that is GICR, GICI, GICR, GICFR, GAIJI, JICAS, JICRO, etc. Recently, smart payment systems are likely to reform the way in which we communicate, make transactions and conduct business in info communication globalization. With this context, the European leaders are focused on spending more energy in meeting the targets to save the real, physical form of euro currency in the collapsing European monetary system, rather than seriously exploring other possible solutions to the recent crisis. That is the introduction of a multicultural smart payment model, CODE.D.TRA, Code of Digital Transactions, together with the central smart euro currency such as Global Info Cash Euro, GISE. According to Info Communication Globalization, Participatory Freedom and the Global Info Cash, GIC, research project, Greek/European citizens, people are very disappointed with the existing banking system and they want to see an authentic relationship between speaking and being heard, input and output, touching the lever and watching the wheel turn. According to the above research report, Greek/European citizens, people do not want merely to be asked their opinions so that bankers and European leaders can claim that they have asked them. Greek/European citizens, people do want to be asked and heard by the bankers and European leaders when they are making decisions which are affecting seriously the quality of their everyday life. According to Info Communication Landscape, CODE.D.TRA, Code of Digital Transactions, and the Global Info Cash, GIC, research report, the emergence of smart payment systems and the introduction of CODE.D.TRA as the multicultural smart payment model in a global free market economy are likely to help Greek, European citizens, people to be accountable for their debt responsibilities, understand the serious role of the public interest in the banking decision-making process, have digital access to appropriate financial sources, be well informed about their financial and human rights in smart payments systems, set up an appropriate smart regulative mechanism for structuring and displaying the banking decision-making process, articulate their ideas about the future of banking transactions, the credit cards transactions and the smartphone as a digital wallet for everyday transactions, and protect their basic transactions rights such as the participatory freedom in the global free market economy, digital access to financial information, validity of transparency in all financial services, privacy, banking accountability, etc. Professor Gantzias pointed out that, in the case of Greece and Europe, the existing political and economic culture needs to be digitally reformed due to the domination of smart payment systems in our everyday life. The Info Communication Research Society, ICRS, recommends the Smart 3 action programs to introduce regulation of smart transactions, RST, the Multicultural Payment Model Code of Digital Transactions, CODE.D.TRA, and the Global Smart Global Currency that is the Global Info Cash, GIC. Within this context, the regulatory model, Regulation of Smart Transactions, RST, is likely to work as a local touch with global reach regulatory mechanism for developing info communication regulation culture in South European countries, that is, Greece, Spain, Cyprus, etc. Nowadays, the lack of a common global regulatory mechanism to collect taxes, to control free market prices, to supervise financial transactions, to manage humanitarian crisis and to develop smart payment systems are among the main reasons for austerity measures in Greece and the emergency of haircut that was imposed on deposits accounts in Cyprus. According to Professor Gantzias, a vital corrective to the above problems would be the three-pronged action program which consists of their legal standards for global info cash, LOSGIC. This action program aims to create a globally compatible legislative framework in which all interested parties agree to use the digital form of money, that is the global info cash, for multicultural digital goods, products and services. The LOSGIC should be able to create a regulatory mechanism both globally and locally in order that irresponsible behavior in the info communication landscape will be penalized by criminal and economical sanctions. Global Info Cash Transaction Rights, GICT. This action program aims to create a network of hierarchical regulative mechanisms for managing money as multicultural digital goods, products and services. The production of the global info cash as multicultural digital services should be subject to a specific multicultural set of public interest principles. digital transaction rights in which all interested parties know where to ask for support for their problems and where to complain at local, national, regional and global levels, and Global InfoCash Multicultural Policies, Strategies and Regulations, GINCP. This action program aims to develop a globally compatible framework of multicultural policies, strategies and regulations for switching to the digital form of money both globally and locally. These types of multicultural policies, strategies and regulations are likely to be subject to the transparency, accountability, reliability, global public interest principles, participatory freedom and democracy, local and global collective will. In conclusion, with this context, the competitive advantages of the Code of Digital Transactions, Code.D.TRA, are flexibility, the ability to introduce the global smart currency that is GIG with its local currencies that is JISA, GIG, GIGAS according to changing global transaction and payment systems. For example, the ownership of payment systems have changed radically. The banking systems no longer specialize only in payment systems. They now operate across as an insurance companies or security transactions managers, STM, in complex webs of alliance, partnership and joint venture. Scalability, the ability to promote regulation of smart transactions with little disruption in global smart payment systems. For example, the traditional regulations of payment systems have undergone significant shifts. Long-standing traditions of banking ownership and regulations of payment systems have been dismantled. Important monetary policy decisions are increasingly carried out at global infocommunication markets, that is encouraging the emerging of infocommunication regulation culture in global smart payment systems. Survivability, the ability to create and preserve local smart currencies with global reach that is JISA, JICAS, GIC, JICI, GISAT etc. For example, the smart payment systems as a global payment ecosystem have become increasingly important in local markets due to humanitarian crisis. In the case of Greece, we recommend to create a new smart currency that is the GIC as a local smart currency in European Union that will be closely attached to the digital Euro smart currencies platform that is JISA. With this context, the Greek market economy is likely to be accountable to its European obligations by creating the digital tax payment culture, DTPC, and a local smart currency with global reach, that is GIC, in order to manage successfully humanitarian crisis and develop its free market economy. Recommended bibliography: Gantzias, 2013. Infocommunication Globalization and Digital Tax Payments Culture, The Greek Crisis and the Global Infocash, The Debt Crisis in the Eurozone. Gantzias, 2013. The Greek Crisis and Code.D.TRA, Code of Digital Transactions, Mobile Payments and the Global Infocash, European Socio-Economic Integration. Gantzias, 2012. Infocommunication Globalization and the Global Infocash, GIG, A Practical Way for Greece to Emerge from Crisis. Gantzias, 2010. The Crisis is an Opportunity to Greece, From Euro to Infocash. Gantzias, 2005a. Cultural Policy and Regulation in the Infocommunication Industry. Gantzias, 2001. The Dynamics of Regulation, Global Control, Local Resistance, Cultural Management and Policy. Gantzias, 1998. The Infocommunication Industry, Digital Markets, Global Services. Mvros, 2011. Digital Money Will Save Us, Social Issues. See more references on conferences article.